Hello, fangirls and fanboys! Welcome back to Random Fandom, the podcast that celebrates you and the fan culture in all its glory, you and us and everything that has to do with that. My name is Shiri, and with me is Chen. Hi, Chen.
Hello, world.
How's it going all the way over there in New York City?
It's okay.
Great. Okay, so what's been happening? What's been going on in fan world?
Well, you tell me.
Okay, let me tell you. Well, first of all, I wanted to talk about two things that has something to do with stuff we talked about last week. Okay? One of them is Good Omens, because there was a part of it that I forgot to mention, and I think it's it makes the story even better. So I thought I'd just share that. You remember we talked about the fact that Good Omens is a book by two writers, Neil Gaiman and Terry Pratchett, who is now deceased. He died 2 years ago. And he had Alzheimer's, and for a long time, he was preparing for his death. And actually, he was one of the people who planned for his death and planned to have himself euthanized. Legally, he made all the arrangements in a country where it's legal. But it didn't come to that because he just passed away. The thing about Terry Pratchett is he was very prolific. He would write about 2 books a year, if you can even fathom that. That's amazing. And he had many books and a lot of ideas and a lot of things planned. And as he started to deteriorate, there was a question of what's going to happen with all this. All this stuff, all this material. Of course, we as fans, we want it all, but he has a mind of his own, and he was a very stubborn man. And there was a lot of talk and rumors about the fact that his daughter Rihanna is taking over all that material, and as an executor of his will, and the person who is now owns everything that he used to own. He's continuing his stories. They sat together. They made plans of where it's all gonna go. Well, it turns out that was false. That was not that rumor was not based on truth. And actually, Neil Gaiman came out to say that Pratchett told him, as far as he's concerned, when he's dead, take everything he wrote, take everything that's still left on his hard drive and his notes and his, notebooks, and just put them in a pile in the center of the street and just drive a semi on them and destroy it all. And so that's what they did, apparently. Late August, just a few weeks ago, I think 2 weeks ago, there was a Pratchett con in England, and if I'm not mistaken, and they put his hard drive and some of his written work in the middle of the street, and someone drove all over it with a combine or something, or a tractor, something very big, make a lot of damage. And so all that wonderful, amazing writing and ideas and worlds are just gone. Which is a little sad for me, I have to say.
I mean, it's sad, though. It's unfinished stuff.
Yes.
And there's something to be said about. I think we discussed it in the past, and I mentioned the Millennium Saga. The author died, and they let someone else continue it, and I am still kind of like weary about reading that book, that new book, because it's just never the same. Mm-hmm. So it's very. It's bittersweet. It's very
Also, what are you gonna do
on the one hand
with his unfinished work? What are you gonna do with it? He didn't finish. It's not the way he wanted it to be. He never took it to that final polished place where the rest of his stuff. When you got them as a consumer, you got them at, as far as he's concerned, at its best, and it's not in that state at all. I wouldn't want people to read my half-assed writing that's on my computer right now. So,
No, this is kind of like what happened with To Kill a Mockingbird, because like the author released in quotation marks, like a prequel slash sequel years and years later. And, you know, the more people dug, it seemed like, you know, she was sick in a home, maybe like dementia, and was, you know, someone made her sign without her actual knowledge on a document that allowed the release of her drafts for To Kill a Mockingbird. So that new book wasn't really a continuation. It was her drafts, early versions, something that in a way wasn't really taken with her consent, but was published because people wanted money. So that's just another example of just how there's a reason why people don't want you to see their unfinished products. It's not, it always feels like some sort of like a capitalist, some sort of a capitalist gain when something that's not finished finds its way into the market.
Yeah, I regret not having to read all that. I completely understand it, you know? I think there's a story about Kafka and his writing, and he burned his novels, or he said, you know what, I don't remember the story and I shouldn't half-ass it. There was something about Franz Kafka and his writing. Go check it out. We'll all go together and read about it in Wikipedia later. And then we'll know.
Be a bit more educated.
Exactly.
About it. Yeah, so let me maybe like mention a tidbit or two before you mention the next thing you wanted to mention. So just a couple of things that I wanted to. One of them is super cute. So going back to Dragon Con, which we now know was a couple weeks ago, but still, Billie Piper, who played Rose Tyler on Doctor Who, one of the most popular companions ever. Absolutely. So she was in the both cons we just mentioned last week, Fan Expo and Dragon Con. And someone at the audience at Dragon Con asked her if she thinks Rose would still have been in love with the Doctor in its female version, because the new Doctor is a female. And not only did she say absolutely, she later on tweeted that Jodie is a babe. It was very, very, I thought it was very cute. And at Fan Expo, she was asked about how does she think the Doctor being a woman would affect the Doctor's relationship with the companion. And Billie said she doesn't think it will affect in any way. That bond was always very strong, a bond of relying on each other, and she believes that will remain as such. But it's just so nice to see that she's like so on board.
Can I say though, I don't think that is true. I don't think Rose would be in love with just any old Doctor. She was very, very specifically in love with the David Tennant version of the Doctor. And the Doctor changes with every, incarnation. He's a little bit different. He's a different kind of personality. And to say, oh, she's in love with every, the Doctor in whatever form he takes, I don't believe that. I don't buy it. I think that's a nice thing to say. I get where she was coming from. I don't think it's different if it was a man. It's like asking her, would Rose be as equally in love with the version of, the last Doctor that we had?
I mean, yeah, I agree with you, but I think it was more like the general notion of like, it wouldn't have mattered to her.
A woman
if that
or
person
a man.
that she was, yeah, you
Well,
know what I
that's
mean?
nice.
Like, if yeah.
But that's not
That's
true.
what I was taking from him.
I'm sorry.
I mean, like, if her doctor was like a female doctor, I think she said what she meant is she would fall in love with her just the same. If it was like the same character and this, you know what I mean? That's what
that sounds better
took
to
from
me.
it.
Yeah, that makes more sense.
Yeah, that's what I understood, and I thought it was super cute.
So that's lovely.
Yeah, that's, just a little, why not, lift our spirits a bit in such a dark time. The other thing I wanted to say, I know, right? Yeah, the other thing I wanted to say was Drew Goddard is going to direct a spin-off of X-Men called X-Force. I don't know if you heard about it.
No.
We love him, of course. He was
I am
involved
not
with
a
all
fan.
the new... You're not a fan.
I'm
I
not
did
a
not know.
fan.
So I like his work. But yeah, he created Daredevil for Netflix. So he does have a history with the world of Marvel. It's different studios and stuff, but still. What's interesting about that spin-off is it's gonna star Deadpool's character. So that's Ryan Reynolds for sure. He's also going to produce, if I'm not mistaken. And another character, the character of... Yeah, I know, character of Cable, whose character is gonna be introduced in Deadpool 2, It's coming out in June 2018. So that's relatively close.
Okay.
And I'll definitely add a link about it. And I believe there was more you wanted to say.
I did, yes. I have this whole thing to share.
Yes.
Well, remember last show we talked about this very strange, well, you remember because you talked about it. It was a very strange thing that happened with the New York bestsellers list, that there was this book that kind of shot to the top of the list and no one has ever heard of it. It was a young adult book and no one knew what it was, where it came from. No one has read it. No one knew how it got there. And people from the fandom discovered that actually it was kind of a hoax. That a person who wrote this book kind of made it go to the top by ordering a lot of books from a lot of stores that are the stores that the bestsellers list, take their information from.
Yeah, the New York Times reporting stores.
It's like the Nielsen thing, you have to be that family with the Nielsen,
with the box,
and then you affect the
with
rating.
the box in your living room.
Exactly.
Right.
So she went to those stores and she pre-ordered a lot of books from a lot of stores, and that kind of twisted the whole thing into making it look like there was big demand and a lot of people are buying this book. So that was kind of a ploy to get a movie deal. So that's one crazy part of it that we reported about before. And then the other interesting part of it was that it was rumored that the story itself, the book that she was trying to, push, was kind of a ripoff of this very... that's crazy right here. Of a very, very famous fanfiction.
Infamous.
It's infamous, yes, but it's famous on its own, It's called My Immortal. It's a Harry Potter fic from the early 2000s. Oh, the mid 2000s, I should say. And the crazy thing about this is if you're gonna rip off a fic, which you can totally do because a lot of fics are just amazing works of art in their own right,
Yes.
This is not the fic to do it because it's not... It was famous for being the worst bad fic in the history of bad fics. And if you don't know what a bad fic is, it's a term in the fic community, or it used to be. I don't think that people use that anymore. But in the late 90s, early 2000s, when the internet was kind of just getting a feel for what it can do as a fandom, and I was deep into fanfiction already then, we called bad fic those stories that are written badly on purpose. The English is bad. It's full of grammar mistakes, who are, funny grammar mistakes and spelling mistakes, which makes it ridiculous. And all the tropes and all the cliches. And it's like horrible, horrible Mary Sue type characters. And if you don't know what a Mary Sue is, then that's something for a later show because that's too big of a subject, too big of a topic to talk about. But you just put everything and the kitchen sink of suck into your story, and it's called BadFic because it's a parody of like what fanfiction at its worst is. And if you're a very good writer, you can do that excellently and make it amazing at being bad. And My Immortal was such a bad, epic story that people just went nuts for it, and it was kind of like it had a cult following at some point, and it's still talked about today as this example of the worst fic. And it's been I think about 10 years, and people keep trying to understand what was that. Very serious people are researching this. It was written by two people, co-written by a woman we'll talk about in a second, and someone called Raven that we don't know anything, not about her and not about the other girl, and they both had internet nicknames, and no one really knew. Was it bad on purpose? Because if it was bad on purpose, it was just genius, and if it wasn't, then it was a freak phenomenon of unbelievable badness. It was too much. You had to figure out what it was, but no one ever had. And so it's so strange to me that connection of this fic with what happened with the bestsellers list, why would you take that plot? It's barely a plot. It's not a plot. It's just...
We don't know, though. We don't know if they actually, like, said that it seemed like a ripoff, or the author just came forward to say, because this is so bad, I don't want you to think that it's me.
I think that...
just because...
I remember reading somewhere, maybe I'm wrong, that someone approached her. You know what?
And
I don't know.
about it?
And asked about it. She wanted nothing to do with it. She said, no, that book with the whole hoax thing, that's not me. That's not... It doesn't have anything to do with my fic. But if you're gonna rip off a fic, why do that? Why?
Yeah, she was like, don't blame me for this as well.
Do not associate my crap-orama with this honest to goodness crap. So that you have to wonder how bad is that book. But we don't know. So that very same person who wrote my Immortal fic, her name is Rose Christo, and she's an author. Since then she's written a book, and now she's writing. She wrote a second book, and it's about to come out. And the story is all about how she wrote my Immortal when she was a young girl. She started when she was 16, and she was in the foster care system. She's been bouncing from place to place around New York, and when she was 12 and her brother was 5, they got separated, sent into different places, and she lost track of him and she didn't know where he ended up. So she kept looking for him, and the book that's about to come out is actually the story of her looking for him. And my Immortal, the part that Very Bad Fic has in that, is that she wrote that in order to generate interest, in order to, to be, I don't know, famous is not the word, but to have enough people know her and have some sort of way to reach a lot of people so that she can get help finding her brother. And this book is about, that search, and that search through writing fan fiction, which is incredible. Like, the power of the fandom again is at the heart of this thing. Now, we don't know a lot more than that. We don't know what ended up happening to them because it's in the book. We want to know. We have to read her book, and right now they're not releasing that information. But what we do know from what she says is, yes, it's her. She wrote that fic. She is kind of ashamed of it, I think. People used to, before this press release about her new book came out, if people approached her and said, is it you? Did you write my Immortal? She was like, oh God, just don't ask me about it.
It wasn't even a press release. Someone from the publisher, I guess, without permission or something, mentioned that it's,
Oh, really?
that it's happening. And yeah, as far as I could understand, as far as I understood, yeah, that's what happened. So that made her come forward, but it's also why she can't really answer any questions, because she doesn't know what she's allowed to say and what's not. And just to clarify, it's a memoir, so it's a memoir, yeah. But of course the fanfic plays a big part of it, because it's the part it played in her life and in her journey to find her brother.
Actually, I have to say, it sounds very fascinating. It sounds like something I would want to read. That story of her.
Oh, I agree with you. Absolutely.
Right? Of her looking for her brother.
Yeah. Using BadFic to find her brother.
Exactly. That's amazing. And
yeah.
Very interested to know if she found him. I kind of guessing that she did, but who knows?
I guess we'll have to read the book, which I think comes out in May 2018.
Yeah. And the book is called Under the Same Stars, I think?
Under the Same Stars or Skies?
Skies. I can't believe that I kind of forgot it. It was, all I talked about today.
It was all you talked about today. I can confirm that.
I think it's just, it just thrills me to see all these connections. As a matter of fact, and you can testify, I was not convinced that this is all not kind of connected to the hoax anyway.
Oh my God, that freaking hoax.
Because it's just too crazy that this would come out like week after week.
Yeah.
Isn't it? It just
Guess we'll
sounds to me like... For a second I thought maybe she is the person who did that thing, you know? Maybe she used it to promote this book. What was going on there?
I guess
But
we'll
no.
have to see how this whole thing unfolds.
Yeah.
Yeah. I do have something you might like, talking about women who write about fan fiction. Rainbow Rowell. There's a new
Yes.
Runaways story coming out. Did you hear about that? Did you ever read Runaways?
I did in the beginning when Joss Whedon got involved. It was in the beginning, I'm sorry. In the middle when Joss Whedon got involved, but
Yeah.
then I'm not a big comic book reader, I'm afraid to say, so it doesn't hold me.
So I actually read it from the beginning, and it was created by Brian Cavan, who nowadays doing Saga, which is incredible. And I read some of his Paper Girls too. I love it as well, but I haven't read as much. And the title was very popular, like you said. Joss Whedon wrote for it, and Terry Moore from Strangers in Paradise. And they're working on a new TV adaptation, which is actually gonna be
Sounds
released. I know, it's going to be released on Hulu in November. So it's not very surprising that, they're trying to bring back the title to the comic book world. And what I found really cool is that Rainbow Rowell is the one writing the new comic series. Yeah, very cool. I couldn't gather if it's going to be a limited run or not, because I guess it wasn't officially published. I guess what they're trying to do is to start it again, see how the reception for it is, and then decide whether or not to continue. But I am excited to read her take on it, for sure.
I just wanted to give a shout out to Rainbow, our homegirl. She's amazing. She's a wonderful writer. She comes from Fandom. I feel very connected to her when I read her books, because she just feels like she's one of us. And I would especially recommend Eleanor and Park. I'm sure everyone's read it, but if you haven't, it's one of the...
I have not.
Oh, dear Lord.
I know, but I read Landline, which I really liked, and Fangirl, of course.
Fangirl needs us to
Carry
talk
On.
about in a more...
Yes, when we
have more time to really go into it, because it really is talking about our shit. This is us.
No, when we get to really discuss fanfiction, and nowadays people write about fanfiction. So Rainbow was one example, because her lead character on Fangirl wrote fanfiction, and
Carry On, one of my favorite books of the late few years. Love it. Totally, I'm in the fandom, reading fanfiction and everything.
It's on my Kindle waiting. It's definitely...
Do not wait. I think you would love it. You would love it.
I have no doubt, because I loved the experts from it on Fangirl. So just to clarify, Fangirl was telling a story about a girl who writes fanfiction, but you got experts from the fanfiction that she wrote, which was Carry On. And then Carry On came out as its own book, and it's basically that published fanfic in its whole. It's kind of crazy.
It actually isn't really, but it's good enough. It's not exactly...
Okay, I don't know, because I haven't read
obviously, you will not find what she wrote in this book, because this book is kind of like the book, her fandom. Simon Snow, Carry On Simon Snow, that's the name of her fandom. That's kind of like a parallel to Harry Potter. Not kind of, it's precisely and very obviously a parallel to Harry Potter. And she's writing fan fiction, so the fan fiction is not in the source material, quote unquote, which is Carry On, the book. You know what I mean? Even though...
Oh, I see what you mean.
That's the beauty of this whole thing.
It's
it's a thing within a thing. It's fic inside a book, inside...
So layered.
Exactly.
So Carry On is kind of like the canon material of that fandom.
Yeah. Sort of, yeah.
Gotcha. All right, that's super interesting.
She took it and she made it into something that stands on its own. It's a wonderful book. And it's a love story, Is it a spoiler? I don't know. It's a wonderful love story.
All right, well, a couple of other little things just before we move on to our main event of the day. Last week, a trailer came out of a special crossover between The Walking Dead and Robot Chicken. It's gonna... I know, listen, I didn't know if I should even talk about it, but then I saw the trailer and it's hysterical, and it's gonna come out at the beginning of October, and tons of, the famous cast members of The Walking Dead voicing their own characters, and of course, Seth Green is involved, and the trailer... honestly, is incredible. As always, Jeffrey Dean Morgan is just, standing out because he's just hysterical. So I just wanted you guys to know that it's happening, and it seems very, very promising.
That sounds crazy. But everything Robot Chicken is crazy.
I mean, listen, I follow The Walking Dead. I love The Walking Dead. So to see this thing, and it's just like, oh my god, I couldn't stop laughing. It was great. So actually, I'm really excited to see that, yeah. Okay, I know I've been mentioning Winona every episode since we started. I just want to say very quickly, because you and I talked about it, how involved the internet is. So there's this characters coming in the next season of Winona. I'm not gonna spoil, but Emily Andros, who's the creator, have been talking about her dream cast for that, and she mentioned Lucy Lawless. I swear to God, yesterday, I'm just like...
You're giddy.
Casting session via Twitter. Like, some fan wrote, Lucy, would you do this? Lucy was like, sure, tell me when and where and when. And then all the fans got crazy, and Emily and Melanie Scrofano, the star of Winona, they just started tweeting at Lucy Lawless, telling her, oh, I'm the showrunner. I actually honestly want you to do it, and I will reach out to your agents, but just know that this will make us very happy. So as far as I'm concerned, this is a done deal, just so you know. So
I hope so. Everything is better with Lucy Lawless in it.
Of course, and we just talked about the huge impact of the queer fandom, and the huge impact of like social media and how it changed the fandom experience, and this was just like a perfect example, because it seems like it's gonna happen, to be honest with you. And if so, like, it's all thanks to Twitter, to be honest. So I thought that was pretty worth mentioning, because that's definitely...
That is crazy how that happens.
I know.
If this ends up to be like a done deal indeed, it's just amazing. This happened over Twitter.
I know.
The world is insane.
That's all I wanted to say on this. Moving on to my last thing for today, which I think you like. It's pretty cute. So, September 17th, it's going to be a 5-part event of the Powerpuff Girls.
Woo! Now I'm excited.
I know, but what's really exciting about it... Did you hear about this? They're gonna get a new Powerpuff. So, wait for it. They're getting a new Powerpuff.
A boy?
They haven't officially revealed her, but the internet, of course, is already suspecting, like we just said. And they're suspecting we're getting a new black Powerpuff Girl.
Ooh,
and
that's
I know, there's
wonderful.
It's incredible. So there's this picture that was leaked into the internet. Nobody knows its source, but it's a picture that shows the 3 original Powerpuff Girls with another character who definitely looks like a black Powerpuff Girl. And if that's not enough, what we do know is that the new character is voiced by a black artist. It's a South African singer called Toya DeLazy, and she actually tweeted about it and saying, and just like that, you become a Powerpuff Girl, and she seemed so excited. So it seems like this is happening. I mean, we'll know in a week, but from that picture and that tweet, it seems like a done deal, and it would be so awesome to see more diversity in something so iconic.
It's amazing. I don't know why I immediately went to boy, a boy Powerpuff. Like, why would there be a boy Powerpuff? Because that would be so nice. He would be just one of the girls, but he would be a boy. And he would still be about sugar and spice and everything. Useless unless you're baking. But
I wonder what her name would be. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
I know.
I don't know.
Super cool.
Cinnamon. I don't know.
Cinnamon. I guess we'll have to wait and see. People are excited, obviously. It's just amazing I
hope that's not
happening.
It's not going to be a letdown, but it sounds good. It sounds solid.
Yeah. And, we talked about, like, the reboot of stuff, or, like, the remake of stuff, or bringing back stuff that were canceled and yada yada. It's just nice to take something, put it in... I personally think it's nice to bring stuff back, give a more diverse twist on it, that's more appropriate to the society that we're a part of. And that actually, I think, leads us to our main story of the day. So how about we actually continue this discussion about diversity? Specifically, we wanted to touch upon the quite explosive subject of whitewashing in Hollywood. And just before we start, I want to clarify that we're basically two white women talking about the subject. I'm saying basically because, while I can not necessarily understand, I have a very light complexion, so I can't necessarily understand what it's like to be a person whose complexion is a cause for discrimination. I will.
Yeah, we're not people of color.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah. But
not.
I will.
I'm ginger, so that's a color.
That's a color, right?
But
I am an immigrant in a country in which my religion and my sexual orientation is a minority. So I, at the very least, have 50 cents to add on that. And of course, we're both Jewish, and Shiri is Israel, and that's a whole other thing about how the race issues work differently in different cultures and different countries.
True. I'm very privileged in a way because I am a white Israeli Jewish person in Israel. If I was a man and not a woman, I'd have all the all the boxes ticked.
Yeah.
But if the second I step outside into the world, I am a Jew, and I do have to deal with that. But that's not the same. That doesn't even come close.
For me, what I always say is I'm privileged because while I belong to at least 3 different minorities, it's not something that you can know about me until I open my mouth, and then you hear an accent, and then you realize that I'm a foreigner. So there's definitely privilege in that. But we've been trying to.
And gay as fuck.
Bisexual as
the
fuck.
moment you open your mouth.
Bisexual.
Asexual as fuck.
A very important distinction, especially nowadays. I personally label myself as bisexual, and it's very important to me because it has its own struggle. So that's definitely something I'm passionate about.
I stand with you in your struggle.
Another thing that, comes to diversity and representation, but again, it's a whole different conversation. But we've been thinking on whether or not we should touch upon this subject, because, my biggest fear is always to offend people because of lack of knowledge. So I just try to talk to as many people as I could and read as much as I could. So if we do happen to somehow offend somebody, we do apologize, but I thought this subject is too important to not talk about. I'd rather talk about it and risk offending someone but starting a conversation than not to talk about it at all.
Plus, it is something that's close to both our hearts. We feel about this very strongly. Of course, we can't look at it from the point of view of people who are actually being marginalized because of it, but we do feel strongly about it. And so we do have the need to talk about it. So that's our disclaimer.
Yeah, this is a very long disclaimer. I mean, we do feel marginalized because we're women, which is ridiculous because being a woman is not even belonging to a minority.
And yet.
But, this is just the world we live in. And yet. But again, a whole different discussion about...
I feel hella marginalized.
Right, a whole different discussion about the gender gap in Hollywood and in every industry, to be honest. But what really... triggered the fact that we wanted to talk about it now is what happened actually on August 28th. So it's already a couple of weeks, but still. And my apologies in advance if I'm mispronouncing any of these names in this, piece, because, I just, when I can, I try to Google how to say people's names, but it doesn't always work. So what happened on August 28th was Ed Skrein, who you guys might know from Deadpool. He was cast in the role of Major Ben Daimio, a Japanese-American character in the new adaptation of Hellboy. And the moment people found out about it, of course, there was a big uproar. And he did not know, but, the
source material.
He did not know about the source material, but the moment, the internet and the Twitters went ablaze, he went and dug in and researched the subject and learned about the origins of the character, and he chose to pass on the role.
Amazing.
Which is a first. It's absolutely amazing. And what I always find fascinating, and people say, oh, now it's a big deal because now it's going to be the new standard. It's going to be an expectation for
It's
people
not.
to do that. And I always find it interesting because as someone who is like, a beginner actress, I always feel like a change in this industry is something that will only come from people who are already established. It sounds terrible, but still, because like for someone who's a struggling actor, it's much harder to pass on a role because the simple thing like paying rent.
It's your job. You have
at the
to
point
get
of my
jobs.
life,
You have to be a face that people recognize.
absolutely, yeah. So I don't judge it.
We can understand it. I mean, and also you were working with casting agents, and if you get a rep for people, a person who pass on things, kind of for with reasons that they don't understand it or they don't deem important, you can have a real problem getting work again. So all those things go into it.
Auditions are so hard to get, not just for the actor, the agent. He works so hard to get auditions to his clients. If I pass in an audition, it makes my agent look really bad, So, again, I believe it's not an excuse because where I was going with this is, I don't judge when beginner actors take some roles like that. But I do judge it when people in a position of power. I'm always like, this change is going to come from the people in the position of power because, first of all, people will hear about this. If I pass on a role, nobody will know.
Yeah.
When this happens, it sets a new standard. And it's not going to hurt this person to the point of survival. Because, again, for me, paying my rent, eating food, that's a point of survival. He could afford passing on it, and he was sending such a strong message by doing that. And it's the whole situation is so very tricky because it has so many like layers. You mentioned casting. What should motivate casting? Should people should the role go to the best person for the role, or should it go to like the best person for the role who's also like belongs to a minority? And then you can say, but that goes back to the script writers, because if to begin with they write more roles that belong to minorities, or if the breakdown is unspecified, so you don't have a set picture in your brain of what race or ethnicity should that person be. So what I'm saying is, it's so layered in Hollywood. It goes so
The
deep.
default is white.
Exactly. It's just, in a way, it's
The
just
same
like
way that the default is thin and pretty, and nobody questions it. So
And the default is straight,
white, and nobody's questioning it. Right. White,
Yeah.
straight, beautiful, and skinny. Great.
And
hair.
I'm saying this as like a bisexual person. I'm saying like, if I'll meet someone, I will assume that person is straight. Just because even in my mind it's still the default, and that's terrible, and just also shows you how long we've been fed these ideas of what's the default. If even a person who belongs to a minority is, looking around him and thinks that's the default,
You have no gaydar. You have to work on
Well,
that.
it's not always that obvious, and that's a good thing because appearance is also like a scale.
That's
what-
also a judgment that
Of
we
course,
make.
what
a person
is
looks like or doesn't look like
Right.
what we expect a certain person to look like.
you don't look like you're gay. What does a gay person look like?
Yeah. What does that even mean?
Exactly. But what I find really interesting in the past few months, and this specific thing with Hellboy was specific for like an Asian American casting, and that's believe it or not, that's a whole other issue because that term Asian American is also an umbrella term. There's so many different cultures under that one umbrella.
Of Asian, that's right.
Exactly. And this is, I think we've discussed it, how some people sometimes they choose an umbrella term just because there's strength in numbers. And people find that it's easier to fight for common goals by coming together, even if they're not really the same, Japanese American, a completely different culture from Korean Americans, from Chinese Americans. So that as a whole is offensive in my opinion because, people are not the same, but it helps for the common goal to come together. So, and there were so many examples in the last year and, Hollywood. It's a whole thing now. And some would say it's not really related to fandom, but I think it does, because like we said, the internet and fandom nowadays oftentimes is the same thing. And it's the internet doing this, like, virtual peer pressure that helps to make a difference.
There's a lot of power in our hands that we didn't used to have, because, like I said before, all they had to judge, like, the changing currents are the ratings. Again, that little Nielsen box. And the commercials, what we buy and we don't buy. If there's a consumer ban on a certain product, if we all, if people came together and said we will not buy this brand, then there's a problem that gets all the way to the top, and the people who make the decisions, they listen up. That was the old days. Today, it's so much easier. It's like 2 clicks away. It's a tweet away,
Yeah.
So big changes are happening, and we have much more power, and we are more vocal, and we know what we want, and we are less afraid to say it. That's all good.
It's also a quicker process. Like we said last week with the book, within a day it was already gone from the New York Times bestseller list due to the internet.
Yeah.
We both agree that there are pros and cons to that power, and I do want us to at some point in the future talk about, there's bullying, and there's bullying in fandom as well.
Well, there's always 2 sides to everything.
Yeah, but it so happens that this time around it really made Ed Skrein research and brought upon the decision to not do it. And what I found interesting is even that thing that's called whitewashing. I don't know that many people, there's so many examples for what whitewashing is, and when you dig deep, you kind of realize even those examples are not exactly the same, and they're not all exactly whitewashing. That's not to say that they're not, symptoms of problems. They're just like
What do you mean?
Sorry, what do I mean? So whitewashing, for example. Tilda Swinton in Doctor Strange, Rooney Mara in Pen. But then you have stuff that people perceive as whitewashing, and it's something slightly different, and I think it's interesting to be educated about it and talk about it. For example, what happened with Iron Fist was more of a missed opportunity for diverse casting. Because he's originally, in the source material, he is a rich white guy, but the show has so many Asian themes that people were really hoping that they will cast someone Asian for the role. And that brings upon a different issue, a trope that's called the white savior complex, because it's it's that thing in fiction when you are in a story that has Asian themes, or like in an Asian country even, and there's a conflict, and the white male comes in, swoops in, and saves the day. So that's kind of something that people felt with Iron Fist, even though, again, the source material is, so I don't see it exactly as whitewashing, but more like a white savior complex. But it's also something you saw with The Great Wall, the Matt Damon movie, which he also produced. But in other films as well, like 12 Years a Slave, even Avatar. You have that
totally
white man.
Avatar.
Yeah, right. All of a
Absolutely.
sudden, when you read about it, you're like, "Oh man, I didn't even think about it. I should know about these things."
But think about where that comes from. That's just history still being... because, white men came to all these countries where they looked at all these different cultures and saw them all as savages.
Of course.
These are European people, and they have all these tools, they have these inventions. They come and see people, and they perceive them as so below themselves, and as if they need to be saved, to be shown the way. And of course, there's also the fact that the world has gone Christian. These are all savages. We have to save their soul. We have to show them. How do we do it? By, just wiping their entire culture away, if not them themselves, taking them home and making them slaves, or just killing them, or just robbing them, or in whatever way, making them colonies will just take over this whole world, because of course we are the supreme, you know,
Whatever.
I don't want to go
Supreme
into
whatever.
oh
Yeah.
yeah, the supreme. I'm just trying to say, not to veer into Nazi territory, but you know what I mean. And
Oh my god.
we are the
We can say
supreme
that we're
race,
Jewish.
you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. We have
yeah.
we can play that card.
No, but it's interesting what
So
you're saying.
that's just a way that the world have been seeing, you know, other parts of it for a very long time, and it's just entrenched. Like we are basically all still going by those Europeans. The Americans also came from Europe mostly.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Imperialism.
yeah, exactly.
I find Avatar to be an interesting example because in Avatar, the white savior turns against his own people to save, you know, the tribe. And I'm like, okay, even when the scenarios that the white people
Same
don't
thing.
win, right, they need a white person to turn against his own so the others are being
Yeah.
saved. I think it's
Much
really
like
worth...
there's always a woman who needs a man to. I'm
Yeah.
sorry to go there, but you know, it's just like that. You know, for most of the narratives in time, it's starting to change a little bit now, but mostly it's been like that. You can be the greatest woman and the most wonderful female character, but you still need to meet that man to change your life, to take you away from all that, to help you, even to find it within yourself, to break the cycle. Even that, you can't do that on your own. You need to have that man in the form of a lot of time love and money. He comes with the love and the money, you know, so
Yeah.
that she can be something that is else and save her. If not literally save her, you
Yeah.
know, she's literally
Yeah.
tied to the rock, screaming, wearing like 2 pieces of fabric,
Oh,
and he
man.
comes saving her. Yeah. Okay.
I highly recommend, you know, no, I totally agree with you. That's
It's all
I
the
feel
same
like
thing.
it's a different trope, but it's almost like a parallel trope,
Mm-hmm.
you know? I highly recommend Googling like a list of the white savior trope and find other examples like The Help, The Blind Side, movies that I've seen and I've never, you know, thought about it, and that's exactly the problem. That me as a as a white person doesn't necessarily think about it or know the origin of things. But I like making this distinguish between whitewashing and the white savior complex. I think it's two different things, and the more you know, the more you're equipped to have a conversation about it and actually inspire change. And then there's a whole other thing, and that is like what I would say the explosive territory. What happened with Ghost in the Shell, the Scarlett Johansson film that I believe it flopped completely. But what happened with Ghost in the Shell? It's based on anime. And
Yeah.
again,
Very
like I don't know.
famous, very popular.
Right, I don't know enough
Anime.
about anime and manga, so I'll try to only stick to the facts that I managed to gather and not like completely embarrass myself. But it was very interesting because, of course, when Scarlett was cast in this thing that is I should have Japanese creation originally, if I'm not mistaken, there was an uproar. And then what was very interesting to me is if you ask a lot of people, obviously not everybody, but a lot of people who understand about anime, or people in Japan, how do you feel about the casting, you would get very interesting replies. Because people argue that, you know, first of all, a manga thing is fiction, and though the creation itself is Japanese, the character is not necessarily Japanese. It's not a real thing, and specifically with that character is cyborg, and some of the themes in that creation is the loss of identity, the loss of ethnicity. Like, she shouldn't be one thing or another. And that character also had a few, like, I don't want to say, what's the word I'm looking for? I guess variations over the years. In almost every movie that came out, like an animated movie that came out, the character looked different. I believe was portrayed by someone else. And fans would say that's what they like about the characters. It's almost like she has, like, you know, different versions over the years. So for a lot of people, it made sense to see, like, a whole new interpretation of someone. Everyone's like, oh, it can be a white person who does it. Of course, some people said that it was a whitewashing excuse, but then again, if you go to Japan and we're asked people on the street, people are like, oh, it will be weird for us if she will look Asian because the character is not Asian. If anything, they found the casting to be quite appropriate. And then at the same time, you have other, there was this video that was released that shows how it feels like to grow up in a place where you don't find yourself represented. Not necessarily just in the media, but was specifically, you see a girl going into a bookstore and looking over titles like Supergirl and the Marvel stuff and just not seeing herself in any of them until she got to Ghost in the Shell. And, you know, she's hugging that book because she finally found, you know, someone that looks like her. And then the girl grows up and goes out to the street and finds a poster promoting Ghost in the Shell, and it's Scarlet, and it's heartbreaking. It was a bit like a punch to the gut, because it was kind of like, you know, it was supposed to make you feel what it feels like. But what I find interesting, and I think maybe Ghost in the Shell, it's his own specific thing, because there's the whole argument about the character, about manga, and anime, but I'm also guessing, you know, and it's not surprising, that there is a cultural difference in that aspect between Asian Americans and Asians who live in Asia, which would not surprise me, because I see all the time differences between...
That makes total sense.
Yeah, like between Israeli Americans, I guess, being people who move from... and Jewish Americans, you know, and I think I was trying to think what's the reasoning for it, and the only thing I could come up with is that, you know, maybe because if you live in Asia and you consume products that were made by Asian companies for people in Asia, then you never experience not seeing yourself represented, because you're like the target of everything that comes out. When you're an Asian American and you live in a society that you're a consumer of, but you don't see yourself in ever, I feel like it's a whole different experience. So I'm almost feeling like it's not that whitewashing is an American phenomenon. We know that it's not. But I almost feel like it's not going to proceed.
But Hollywood is, you see?
Yeah,
That's
well,
the thing.
Yes. Or the industry.
Most entertainment is made in America. Or is accepted worldwide as being more American. And so you can't help but say this is coming from a very American type culture.
Right. But that's
By
also...
the way, British casting is slightly different. You can see in a lot of British shows, you can see a lot of representation. They're much more open to that than Americans. That's very refreshing to see.
Yeah, and like the rulers of it is Canada. And we talked about, you know, how much more progressed Canada is than Hollywood right now. And this is why it's so exciting to see many Canadian projects making it to the US and kind of like upping the standard. But I think it's very interesting because I feel like, you know, people can use this argument of like, oh, people in Asia don't care. You know, like producers, studios can use this argument, and it's good that you're equipped with the knowledge to come and say, it's not the same culture, you know, it's not the same experience. They're not experiencing what we're experiencing by being Asian Americans, and your argument is invalid. And, you know, but I did find it fascinating because, you know, in our minds, again, me as well, like I was like, oh, what's the big deal? How come people in Japan don't care but people here care so much? It's good to ask these questions and do that research and start to realize...
I'm sure they have different places where they feel marginalized and unrepresented. For example, in certain places in Asia, again, I have to disclaim, Asia is a very big place. It's a whole continent. There are many different Asians out there, you know? Absolutely. But I'm sure women in certain places feel marginalized in certain ways. The rules are very strict. It's not the same.
Every country...
Exactly. Every place has its own thing.
Look at Israel without getting political. Jewish Israelis, if we're only looking at for a moment at Jewish Israelis, you know, you have people from Eastern European descent, you have people what we call Ashkenazi, and you have people from like African or Asian descent, what we call Sephardic, and we have Ethiopian Jews, and they're not being treated the same by society.
No.
Or you look...
Again,
right. Or
the darker you are in, you know, the darker your skin, the worse you get treated. It's the same thing here. The people come from African countries. The people come from Ethiopia. They get treated differently. It doesn't matter, you know, what they're actually bringing to the table as people.
Same in Russia. Same in Italy. Like Italian with darker complexion will not be treated the same as Italian with lighter complexion. So it's yeah.
So fucked up.
And I think it's also good to keep in mind because, I've had arguments here with people who state certain things as fact, and I'm like, where I'm from, it works differently. It doesn't work the way it works here. So what you're saying is very, very relevant for here, but where I'm coming from is a bit different culturally, and you can't tell me that I'm wrong because you don't know my culture. You know what I mean?
Yeah. But I think Americans tend to, from my experience with Americans, I'm sorry, again, that's a generalization, but and America is a huge ass place, but still there's a kind of a feeling like the world is America, the world is the United States, and everything that's outside of it is kind of like a secondary world, you know what I mean? The default is American, and then there are other things. So it's hard to see a point of view of different culture.
Yeah, and I mean, okay, so we kind of made a distinguish between, technical whitewashing and the white male savior trope and the lack of diversity, which is a different issue, but just a different one. And I, from my little point of view of being an Israeli immigrant, I understand the need for diversity. Like, it will take years before we, discuss Israelis in the media, but my 50 cent on the matter is when I see non-Hebrew speakers, non-native Hebrew speakers being cast for Israeli roles, it kills me, and I'll tell you why. Not necessarily because the way it looks, but because the way they speak Hebrew actually kills me.
They do not speak Hebrew.
It's terrible.
Let's just stop here. They never speak Hebrew.
I mean, yeah.
They learn phonetically, and it sounds like crap, and I'm sure other people with other non-English, non-French or German or, languages, when they hear their own language on TV, it does not sound good.
I want to rip my eyes out. I mean, listen, I enjoyed season 1 of Quantico, but it was very hard to get through, and two Mossad agents on what was it, Person of Interest, same thing, and I'm like, listen, this is not the actor's fault. If he's not a native Hebrew speaker, he will not know that he doesn't do a good job. You'll need to bring a dialect code, so diversity.
Listen, let me say two things about Israelis in media, okay? When I say media, I mean American TV, let's not say media, because look, we are both Israelis, so to us it's important, but Israel is a very, very small place in a very, very big world. Most people don't care, okay? But because it's us, let's talk about it for a second. Israelis on TV and in movies are two things: ex-soldiers or Mossad agents. The end. They do not have any other occupations. Yeah. They have no other skills. They come from war, and that's it.
Well,
sometimes they have diamonds that they need to sell. But actually, that's more like Jews, New York Jews, if we're gonna get really down to it.
And we only eat hummus.
And we only eat hummus because, what else is there? Yeah. Well, that's true, actually.
But I'm saying,
no.
I'm okay with, I'm okay with quote-unquote, Israeli representation being very much down the line, because it's not much of a problem. But what you're describing is very much like, Asian American actors being only cast as the characters of the nerdy best friend. That's another thing about diversity. It's like these, like Asian Americans cannot lead a show.
It's not the same. It's even lower than that. We are in a lower round.
Yes,
but that's okay.
We are down the line.
Yeah, but there's a very few of us.
It's because we're actually making some progress with representation of big minority groups in America. Israelis are not exactly top priority, and what I'm saying, that's for the time being, I'm very much okay with it.
Yeah,
because
that's
we're
fine.
very small. Because America supposed to create content for Americans, and it's much more crucial that Asian Americans and African Americans see themselves represented than Israelis, who are just a teeny tiny fraction of the American society.
It just makes sense. But actually, there have been here and there are Israeli characters. Like, I distinctly remember, I didn't watch that show, but on NCIS. They had a Mossad agent, of course she had to be. Her name, I think Ziva David, her name was. And she was there for a very long time, several seasons. And at the end, I think she went back to Israel in the show. Not really, she just left the show, and then she died in Israel. And I read in Wikipedia that she died in the David farmhouse. Which sounded so ridiculous to me, because Israel doesn't have a lot of farmhouses. I don't know, it's such a weird little thing. But I don't know how she used to speak Hebrew, if at all, and how it sounded. But I do remember on the very first episode of Alias. Remember Alias?
Mm-hmm.
Very first
of
episode.
Course. I love Alias.
I know you remember. I was kidding. It was just, it's been a while. So on the first episode, first time she goes into that, the place where the agency, I don't remember the agency's name, but you see her go through that elevator that takes her to that place, and then she walks to her desk, and you can see people working, and like she walks by people who speak different languages, I guess, and one of them is speaking Hebrew, and he's saying some kind of a sentence that's just horrible. It's just mangled beyond anything. And it was just so shocking to hear. It was just horrible. I remember it to this day. But that's just like a little thing for us, that's
No, but honestly, I don't get it. There's so many, pointing itself, Israeli actors.
Yeah, people know these languages. Just give it to people who know.
I mean, and I'd like to think some of us are decent actors. So I just don't understand why. Why not just cast Israelis for Israeli roles? It's not like there are tons of those roles anyway, so it's not like that big of a deal. But
or get a coach. Firefly, they spoke Chinese. They got a coach, and they still mangled it up pretty well. But
no,
they did get a coach for it. Can we talk about Chloe Bennett now?
Chloe Bennett, that's what I was gonna say.
Okay.
Yes. So going back to our original discussion, we did want to say a few words about Chloe Bennett.
Okay, so Chloe Bennett is that lovely, lovely girl off of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. She's just the sweetest. And Bennett is not actually the name she started working. She is Chinese American. Spent a lot of time in China. She was a pop culture icon there, wasn't she?
I think she's a bit of a Robin Sparkles, was a famous pop star overseas.
She was born with the name of Chloe Wang, actually, a completely Chinese name. When she tried to work in the States and get booked for jobs, and, there's no reason why she wouldn't. She's a beautiful person. She's very good looking. She's young. She's talented. Why wouldn't she get jobs? But immediately when you read the name Chloe Wang, I guess you just move on, on your casting list to the next person who sounds less Asian. So,
she did say, and I thought it was very important that, people told her, like, you are not white looking enough to play the lead, but you don't look Asian enough to play the Asian best friend.
It's ridiculous. I cannot. That's just, the sentence is just makes my ear bleed. You don't look that, you do look that, whatever. Just, a person is in front of you, they're acting, judge the acting, and just, whatever. Mm-hmm. Okay, that really made me mad.
I know, and this is exactly the point. And, the whole thing this week started when she was supporting Ed's decision, saying that's the way to do it, and people started pointing out that she was neglecting her own heritage by the fact that she changed her name to Bennett, which FYI is her father's name, first name, I believe. So it's not like, and she's like, what we discussed earlier, when you're not in a position of power, when she was a beginning actress, struggling actress, she's like, I couldn't pay my rent because I couldn't get a job because people wouldn't hire someone with the name Chloe Wang. Which is, and now that she's in a position of power, she's saying, I did everything I could to get to a point where what I do matters and helps, so the next Chloe Wang doesn't have to go and change her name in order to actually get a job. And she did an online interview. And she does say this new normal that Ed kind of like set is gonna, open a door for other actors to feel like they can do that.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Is there anything else we want to say about Chloe before I conclude with a pessimistic note?
I didn't. Oh, pessimistic note. Ooh. It's not specifically about Chloe Bennett, but it is about Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. And this whole thing just remind me, the creators of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. are Marissa... Oh God, I knew
Tenchhorn?
Exactly, I knew I would not be able to actually go through her name. Tatron and Jed Whedon, J-Mo, as they are called, for friends of the family. And they are a couple, and Jed Whedon is Joss Whedon's brother, and they were both involved heavily in Joss Whedon's show that I loved, Dollhouse. And they all did together the wonderful sing-along blog, Dr. Horrible's sing-along blog, which was an amazing experiment. Yeah, I'm not going to go into that, despite my better judgment. One of the earliest experiments in will people watch content on the internet and not just on TV? And the answer was yes, and this is what TV looks like now. So it's a sing-along blog, it's a musical. It was a huge hit, and it was a cult phenomenon. And then when the DVD came out, they attached a commentary track, but it was called Commentary the Musical, and the entire commentary was another musical. Just song after song after song that has to do with the, life behind the scenes and their private jokes and what they went through. And Marissa's song was called Nobody's Asian in the Movies. And it's literally a song that says, nobody's Asian in the movies, nobody's Asian on TV. If there is a part there for us, it's a doctor or a technician or a mathematician or, that groupie in the corner, that's me. Because she wrote this with them, and she wrote the part of Penny, which was the leading actress in Dr. Horrible's sing-along blog. And she even...
portrayed by Felicia Day.
Felicia Day. And she says in that song, I even played her part on the demo, but when it comes to cast the show, will they cast somebody yellow? Hell no. That's actually the words to her song. She's very bluntly saying, no one will cast me, including my husband, my brother-in-law, and the people who are making this show with me don't think that me, because I am Asian, can play the lead. We have to get a tiny little petite ginger girl, very, very pale one, to play that sweet little role.
Because it's all about marketing.
Yeah, and I think that was such a brave song, because it didn't mince words. Like to say, will they cast somebody yellow? Hell no. That's not exactly beating around the bush. She just says it. And then later on she says, basically the song says, we are only good for being the doctor. And actually, check your TV. Look how many doctors just that are beat parts just coming into, the emergency room or just giving the white family the news of their loved ones are Asian. Almost all of them. Now, now Indian Americans are also being cast in that role, but for a long time it was Asian Americans, always. Like, they can be doctors, they could be mathematicians, they can be that, anyone in a lab coat is a good guess for them. Or, you can be that little Asian geisha type Vietnamese horror girl. Love you long time. And all that's in that song. So that kind of tied that whole thing up for me.
Yeah, absolutely. Agree with everything you say, and things are pretty grim. But like we see with what happens when you have women in the writers' room and you have women behind the camera as directors, then when it's product that includes women, the portrayal is much more accurate. And when you have people like Marissa being, basically in charge of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., then you get 2 Asian Americans in the lead role.
Exactly.
They're series regulars. Mm-hmm. And the cast itself is, is pretty diverse. And
badass women.
Yeah, And again, going back for just a second to Winona, the creator just this week said that they're definitely aiming for it. And like we discussed earlier, it's they definitely want the best actor in the room to get the job, but they're on the lookout in front and behind the camera for people of all sorts, and I think it's very important to be active about it. And there, you slowly but surely see a change, and of course a big part of it is the internet, like we discussed many times. So I would be optimistic, but I also wanted to mention that even with everything we've talked about, and even with everything that's happening, and the actual peer pressure that people put on the studios, this week it was announced that the live-action Disney film for Aladdin basically created a whole new character, going to be portrayed by Billy Magnussen.
Yeah, because God forbids.
Yeah,
there are not enough white people.
Right. It's like
this African place where this takes place.
In Persia, I believe.
Yeah. Oh, okay, in Persia, right? You're right.
I think so. Agrabah, I think. Yeah, but yeah, and people could argue that his character is not the only new character in the film. You also have Nassim Pedrad from Saturday Night Live and many awesome things portraying a new character as well. But of course, many people would say it almost feels like Billy's character, who's going to be like a rival prince to Aladdin, was only created so there will be at least one white person in a film in which all the heroes are not white. And people are like, is it really that terrible to like just not have someone in the lead cast that is white? Would that really be the end of the world?
Apparently, yeah.
And I personally don't think that it would be the end of the world. So there was, of course, an uproar about it. I'm curious to see, how this will develop. Maybe it was like just a script necessity. But, if they wanted to maintain that look of that part of the world, they didn't really have to cast a white dude, though. Knowing the story, you have princes coming from all over to kind of like get the girl's heart. So maybe he's a European prince, whatever.
Well, we shall see.
We shall see. Yeah, I think that's it with this discussion. Of course, we can go on forever in this discussion, and we actually would love to hear your opinions about it. But I think that's it for now. Alright, so I'll just mention super quickly that the new season of BoJack Horseman just aired on Netflix. I just finished watching it before. What's interesting about this show is that it has an official self-proclaimed asexual character, so that's definitely important. It was a great season. Amazing voice cast as always, so, totally recommend it. And that's about it.
My buddy Paul F. Tompkins is on it. I don't care about anyone else. Just him.
Well, Mr. Aaron Paul is also the leading man of the path.
No, there are amazing.
There's
amazing voice casting in it. I'm not saying it otherwise. I'm just saying, we love who we love. And I love me some Mr. Paul F.
Lots to love about this show.
All right.
I think that's it.
Yeah. I really enjoyed this. There was a lot to think about and a lot to unpack, and I think we didn't even scratch the surface, but that's just life on this planet, and I'm sure we'll talk more about all of this in later shows. But until then, you guys are more than welcome to leave us your thoughts, your opinions. If we said something that kind of rubbed you the wrong way, tell us. If we said stuff that you completely agree with, we would love to hear it. And you can hear us in 1,000,001 places, and leave us messages on Facebook, on SoundCloud.
Yes. Yeah, these 1,000,000 places include iTunes and Stitcher and Blueberry and YouTube and Tumblr. So just know your options.
Yes. If you listen to our show and you enjoy it, please feel free to tell your fangirl and fanboy friends about it, and also give us a review and rating on iTunes. That's always good, only if you want to. And that's it. I think we'll see you next time with plenty more. Chen?
Yes, I just
you.
let you finish, but thank you.
Thank you so much. Well, thank you for being here with me.
Thank you for joining me.
All right, bye.